Hi, everybody. Adam Savage in my cave, and I'm still having trouble finding my slate for these videos when I shoot them on my phone. But I wanted to cover another. We've been covering a lot of camera equipment. I've been covering a lot of camera equipment on the channel these past couple of months, specifically Reflex, a 35 millimeter camera, battery charger. I've been doing some builds with that, and it has sort of started to wake up some parts of my brain long dormant, like things that very few people use anymore, like this color filter. Every DP, director of photography, that I ever worked with in commercials had one of these around their neck, and they use it all the time. And I'm going to muck up the description of what this does, but from my understanding, it shortens the dynamic range of the lighting in the room so the director of photography can better understand what their lighting is going to land on film. I'm sure I'm getting a lot about that wrong. I am not a director of photography, but I was like, oh, you know what? I remember everyone used to have one of these. Everyone used to use one of these, and we don't. The fact is, the dynamic range inside this camera is an astounding achievement of science and engineering. I know there are many phone cameras. I know there are many brands of phones. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to talk to some of the senior engineering team of Apple's cameras. And the degree of fidelity they are seeking with that, and the low light capabilities of these cameras are literally mind-blowing if you grew up trying to expose onto pieces of celluloid using silver nitrate like I did. And the compromises that had to be made in order to expose film it's not a lost art, but it's an art that is disappearing because we don't need it because we have such amazing cameras digitally. I point this camera and it's able to read the lighting, the dynamic range. It's able to look at the hottest spots and the lowest light and do a balance between them. And it's all automatic. And it's been largely automatic since the late 70s is when light meters, I think, started to show up in most consumer cameras. And you started to, there's always been point and shoots, but automatic light metering, that was like a big feature in the 60s and the 70s coming up. And again, our modern digital cameras do so much work for us that you might not realize that for the longest time, cameras had just a few settings. You put a certain speed of film. If it was bright daylight, you might use a 50 or 100 or 200. If it's a little dark, you might use a 400, a slightly faster film that could expose more light in a shorter period of time. Did I get that backwards? It doesn't matter. What I mean to tell you is that cameras like this one here, there's nothing automatic about this camera whatsoever. There was no light meter built in. There was literally one motor that advances the film, and that's the sum total of what the camera body does. Then the lens has an iris, right? So it can change the amount of light getting to the film plane. So how did you know how to get enough light to the film plane? It's with one of these. And I'm not just doing a little educational video about film history and the equipment of it. I have a deeply personal connection to this because as I was looking at pieces of old camera gear, I found a picture of a director of photography on a set using one of these. This is a Spectra professional light meter. And just as every director of photography I worked with in the film industry and the commercial industry had one of these, so too did they also have one of these. This was, to my understanding, the gold standard of light meters. There's no battery in this thing. It is fully automatic. It has dials and gauges on the back for adjusting its measurements, plus removable exposure cards that, again, can help you effectively dial in all the parameters. So what you would do is you would consider the speed of film that you're putting in here. let's say it's 200, you'd put in 200 here in the ASA. Then you would look at the type of lens you were using. You would look at the iris you wanted, which would adjust the depth of field. And then you would sit there with your light meter and you'd go out on set with these settings and you'd make sure that nothing within your set was outside the range of being lit or unlit that you wanted. But this means that, like, for every shot, there was a DP sitting there. You're doing this for the lights. Just like holding it all over the place. And so, like, just think about this for a second, right? You'd have a commercial shoot in which like 30 people are on a set. We're costing $10,000 an hour, easily 10 grand an hour to be doing our thing. And the director of photography is arguably more important than the director. They are the one getting the commercial onto the frames of celluloid. And it's, you know, with a modern camera, you're like, I'd like it to look like this, and we'll adjust this, and we'll adjust this. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot to do with a lot of amazing things to do with modern cameras, and I am not denigrating them at all. But they do so much work for you. In fact, incredible world-class DP Guillermo Navarro, who shot Hellboy, and just look up his IMDb. He's shot everything. I met him on the set of Pacific Rim, and he was shooting with a Red camera. And I said, how do you like shooting on the Red? It was not the early days of Red, but like, you know, it was that moment in time when some movies were still being shot on 35 and more were being shot on digital. So I was like, how do you like the experience? And he said, you know, the Red camera, he said, film, she adjusts to me. The Red camera, he said, I have to adjust to her. Now, I am pretty cognizant that I would need to be a much better cameraman and photographer and understander of film to understand the full depth of what Navarro meant when he said that. But he comes from a school of professionalism where he shows up on a set and the light making it from the set, using all the lights and the film speed and the shutter speed and the iris to get that film onto the film plane and make it perfect. That was all happening inside his head. That's the thing about being a director of photography that blows my frickin' mind. Yeah. And so my father was an animator and a filmmaker, primarily a painter, and I've talked about that extensively. And I said he was a madman. He worked in advertising in the 50s and 60s in New York. He also did a lot of shooting of animation in his studio behind our house. And I will tell you that, like, this object was always in my dad's studio. It was ubiquitous. And it was always like this beautiful mystery. I barely ever touched it because it was an expensive piece of dad's equipment. In the 60s, these were hundreds of dollars. Now you can pick up a full set for $40 on eBay, as I did this one. But this was always there. And so as I was looking through this film equipment and I was thinking, I came across this picture of this. I was like, oh, the meter, the light meter. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot about the light meter. My dad always had one. His had that snake chain, that camera snake chain. I've got one arriving in a few days by mail. But yeah, it's such a sense memory of exactly the thing that I love, which is this object clearly did something really important. But what? I didn't understand when I was 8 or 9 years old. I knew he held it up, but what did that mean? None of it made any sense to me. Now I have occasion to think about my dad using this, right? My dad he was a filmmaker and a director. The director didn't often have one of these. So I think he used this in the service of shooting his animation. I'm trying to figure out how to like make this rhetorical turn that I'm thinking about here. And it has to do with gear and philosophy and the things that we love to do. I've talked about this before on the channel. Tom Sachs loves to point out that for any given discipline, whether it's flying airplanes or cooking or carpentry or surgery, you will find within the scope of people that practice that craft, some are into the craft because of the gear, and others don't care about the gear at all, and they're only into the craft for the philosophy. And most of us fall somewhere in the middle. We like the gear, we like the philosophy, we bring them together. I admit I am a complete gearhead. Obviously, you look around this place and it is a palace to a freaking gearhead. Absolutely. I also love talking about the philosophy of the thing, but I love the marker of my dad as a gearhead because I remember he really liked the gear. He really liked the finessing of the engineering of the thing. So just imagine, you're the DP, you show up on a set, they put some film in the can, you pull this out, you light the thing, and then you expose it, and they send it to the film developer, and like the next morning, you get to see how you did. That sounds like the most stressful thing I could possibly imagine. I'm gonna finish this video talking just about this one sound, which I love, which is at the end of every take, when you are on a set using a film camera, the director would say, cut, check the gate, or the AD would say, check the gate. And the gate is literally the film playing between the film and the lens where the image is getting exposed. And at the end of a successful take, if you liked it, you check the gate and you make sure there's not like a hair or a piece of dust in there or something that's going to mess up the exposure of your film. And then the AC, the assistant camera person, would say, gate is clear. And you'd know that you could print that film and, well, you didn't know how it would expose, but you knew it wasn't going to have some obvious big thing. So I just love that sound. Cut, check the gate, gate's good. I appreciate you indulging me in talking about the history of film gear and my associations with it. Yeah, these are beautiful pieces of engineering, and we're not losing them. But I feel like it is a good thing to keep in touch with them. Because we in this modern world, we think of everything as progress. And so when something is no longer needed, we're like, well, we don't need that anymore. And that is in polar opposition to like the ancient Greeks, for instance, right? Who were like, they didn't think of things as constantly getting better. They thought of things as static. They thought of things as the way they were. They weren't thinking innovation is going to make everyone happier soon. It's going to make everything better. None of that was going on back then. So the idea of things constantly moving forward, understand, is a semi-recent cultural phenomenon. I mean, recent by a couple of hundred years, but still fairly recent. And so I love keeping in touch with technology like this. I don't view thinking and talking about this stuff as too different from the World War I airplanes that Peter Jackson and his people built in New Zealand. It's not too different from Clickspring rebuilding the Antikythera mechanism. We'll make a mistake if we think that our past engineering solutions can no longer help us move into the future. That's a mistake. That is a poor way to think about technology and engineering. We have so much to learn from the past. The trick is to keep it awake and keep it alive. And that's what I'm trying to do with some of these videos. Thank you guys for joining me for this show and tell. I will find that slate around here somewhere. Honestly, it's probably in the frame that you're looking at. All right, thanks guys. Adam Savage out. I'll see you next time.
One of the things I love about this channel is that we don't make how-to videos so much as we make what happened videos. And what almost always happens are mistakes and screw-ups. In fact, they're completely integral to making and honestly to being a person. And to celebrate this, Tested has a new batch of demerit badges for the screw-ups you will encounter in the shop. From left to right, we have touching your paint job, assembling things backwards, losing a tiny screw or part, gluing your fingers together, and smashing your thumb. And frankly, if you haven't done both of these, even if you're not a maker, I just don't feel like you've experienced enough of the world. I'm not saying get out a hammer and smash your thumb, but I will tell you that the blacker your fingernail after the injury, the less it's gonna hurt in the long run. I almost forgot, these make excellent additions to your shop apron, and they are available at tested-store.com.